Live. Okay, so you can listen to us from now until the end of the show at 8 o'clock. Go ahead. So the subject matter for tonight is the part 3 of fertility, infertility, gynecological problems, male and female. And like I said, the wealth of phytochemicals within plants are used for a multitude of pathologies for people. So that's very exciting, very interesting, and it's a never-ending research subject. It just continually gets bigger and broader, and we find more and more plants, we find more and more phytochemicals that are used for disease. And as far as I'm concerned, there's a plant for every condition. For every condition of man, there's been plants that have been used in the treatment of it. So you're listening to Ask Your Herb, Dr. KMUD, Garberville 91.1 FM, and on the web at www.kmud.org. So I said also that from 7:30 to 8 o'clock, you're invited to call in with questions related or unrelated to this month's subject. So as I said, and we're live streaming this program to the Western Botanical Medicine YouTube channel, and you can listen right now on the channel by searching Western Botanical Medicine in the search bar on YouTube by clicking on the live stream. So last month, I got to Angelica sinensis, Dong Quai. Angelica's definitely got spasmolytic effects. So these are spasm breaking effects on the uterus, specifically in the treatment of dysmenorrhea, which is painful periods. And these painful periods obviously are a byproduct of spasm being caused by prostaglandin, inflammatory mediators, and those kind of chemicals within the body that signal inflammation. It appears to normalize uterine activity and ease pelvic blood flow, which relieves pelvic congestion and pain. The Chinese have always assigned pelvic congestion to this particular plant. So traditionally, it's been combined with peony lactiflora, which is the white Chinese peony, as well as Ligusticum wallichii for menstrual pain that is typically aggravated by the cold. So now modern herbalists then extrapolate that usage to suggest that Angelica sinensis is a relaxing blood mover. Now that can improve circulation to the uterus and thus assist in normalizing the endometrial lining and supporting implantation. So the factors that affect fertility or infertility, just to go through some of these, endometriosis and endometrial function. So this is what we're going to look at in more detail later on. Insulin, lipid profile and metabolic disorders, thyroid gland and hormone disorders, female reproductive cancer, female reproductive canal disorders, things like PCOS and ovarian function, and then obviously menopause. So I wanted to talk about red clover. Don't want to say too much on it, but obviously red clover has certainly been one of those herbs that's used in the pharmacopoeia. And I want to pull out two other particular herbs, Viburnum opulus and Viburnum prunifolium, from a 1983 British herbal pharmacopoeia, and just discuss some of the activities on that and the slight differences between the two. So red clover, looking at some research here, the extract of which after 21 days increased the weight of the uterus via binding estrogen receptor alpha, and through binding to estrogen receptor beta. This increased mammary gland development and plasma prolactin level and decreased bone loss in overoptimized rats. So the doses they were using were 200 and 400 milligrams per kilo of red clover hydroalcoholic extract. It suppressed the proliferation of triple negative breast tumor cells and their metastasis to the lung and brain. In these mice, there were 4 T1 tumor bearing after 35 days, partly via activating the estrogen receptor alpha signaling pathway, decreasing 17 beta estradiol levels and modulating apoptosis related pathways. So red clover has always had a long historical use in Europe and particularly in England for the treatment of cancer. And whilst, quote unquote, we're not allowed to treat cancer, even in England as a practicing medical herbalist, your license doesn't allow you to treat cancer, but you can always treat the side effects of cancer, the sickness and lethargy and all of the other organ-related dysfunctions that cancer can produce. But red clover's got a long historical use for uterine and mammary cancer. We've mentioned Vitex agnus castus quite extensively, but I'm just going to speak to it a little more. It's in the Verbenaceae. So if you look at the botanical phylogeny of the Verbenaceae, Vitex is one of those components. And Vitex, again, does contain a lot of aromatic hydrocarbons and terpenes, monoterpenes, diterpenes, etc. It's not just the Labiati that do this, but the Verbenaceae is another one of those large families that does actually have the capacity to produce these particular phytochemicals.
Also, will you tell us a little bit about where it's native to? Vitex agnus castus, also known as chaste tree berry.
Yeah, it's kind of endemic to the Mediterranean basin. So that's one of its main areas of endemic population. It's also found, you'll find it in Spain and up in Italy. Again, this is kind of Mediterranean. All the way down. I'm not too sure Egypt, whether Libya or Morocco, but I think more to the eastern end, Israel for sure, probably Lebanon, Syria. But it's mainly Mediterranean basin. But Vitex grows here quite well. It's not endemic by any means, but
we do have some in our garden. And what I do notice about it is that it doesn't like the cold, and it takes a long time to leaf out. Has to start getting very warm before it will leaf out. Yeah. And then consequently, because it then has a much shorter growing season, it doesn't really produce those chaste tree berries. That's a medicinal part of the plant in abundant amount before the winter rain and frost comes.
Okay, so its main use is in the treatment of gynecological diseases and premenstrual symptoms. It's really very much a female herb, but its common name is monk's pepper. And again, with anecdotal evidence seems to suggest that extracts of this particular plant were used to decrease libido. So mainly for gynecological disease and premenstrual symptoms in women, but has been used to dampen libido in males.
And it also blocks prolactin.
Yeah. I was going to speak to that too. So the symptoms of premenstrual aberrations such as depression, sadness, and irritability, as well as irregular menstrual bleeding, hyperprolactinemia, which is excessively high prolactin, dysmenorrhea, painful periods, and menopausal problems. So by acting on dopamine receptors, Vitex extract reduces prolactin secretion, it modulates the release of FSH and LH, it increases serum levels of estrogen and progesterone, and ultimately improves sexual function. And the extract of this plant also stimulates the secretion of corpus luteum after ovulation to produce progesterone, which ultimately regulates female sexual cycle. In an animal study by Yakuba and Akanji in 2011, it was observed that the serum levels of estrogen and progesterone increased in the group receiving Vitex compared to the control group, while LH and prolactin, sexual function disruptive hormones, decreased. Also, a study in rats with induced PCOS showed that the extract of this plant reduced the number of preantral and antral follicles and corpus luteum in comparison with the control group after 28 days. Also, the diameter of antral follicles and the thickness of follicular theca and ovarian tunica albuginea increased compared to the control group. We do find within patient groups that this particular herb, and you'll find this as well in British literature or the pharmacopoeia, that generally Vitex takes a couple of months, 2 to 3 months, to begin to regulate aberrant menstrual cycles. So if you have a deficient luteal phase and you only have a 24, 22 or thereabouts cycle, it can take 2 to 3 menstrual cycles to correct. Again, hormones, nothing's acting very quickly with hormones, and these things, once they're set up, can take a couple of months to regulate.
Yeah, basically from the stem cell in the ovary to a developed egg that's ready to ovulate or to come out of the corpus luteum, that's basically 3 months. So if you're suffering from infertility or irregular cycles, you do need to take an adequate amount of Vitex agnus castus, otherwise known as chaste tree berry extract, for a minimum of 3 months. Some people do notice a regulation of their cycle earlier than that, but it's also useful to keep cycles regular at the end stage or at perimenopause, when cycles start to become progesterone deficient and irregular or heavy or painful, that it can be very helpful at that stage as well. It's just a really wonderful all-around herb that can help with regulating cycles, and no matter what the age. Also, because it blocks the prolactin, it's also useful in Parkinson's patients to help boost levels of the neurotransmitters that are deficient from the disease process.
Okay, so nothing would be complete without mentioning Viburnum opulus, commonly known as crampbark in this regard. So crampbark then exhibits significant pharmacology, primarily as an antispasmodic, anti-inflammatory, and uterine tonic, with key compounds like phenolics, coumarins like scopoletin, and arbutin contributing to its effects on smooth muscles of both uterus, bronchial, and vascular tissue. It also has antioxidant, antimicrobial, and potential anti-diabetic cardioprotective actions as well. It's traditionally used for cramps, pain, and spasms of the uterine tract. At this point, I wanted to turn to the British Herbal Pharmacopoeia. This was a book that we got as students studying herbal medicine on day one, and going through the materia medica in the first 2 years of the degree. This was one of the books that we would reference for not just the pharmacognostic examination of dry plant and dry herb matter under a microscope for its identification, but to get familiar with the therapeutic actions as well as the phytochemicals within the plant, getting us ready for biochemistry and the more kind of in-depth pathology later on, looking at the components within plants and how they affect disease processes, to try and begin to make links between various phytochemicals and tissues that are responding to it, and how pharmacologically the activity of that chemical could relate to the disease process. So the kind of learning process was switched on pretty quickly. In England, I'm not sure we recognize that here in the States, but in England, when you do a degree, you've already done 2 years of undergraduate prerequisites. So when you start a degree in England, you don't do any kind of basic undergraduate stuff. You've already expected to have done it in England.
Yeah, they don't really have general education in their university system. You do your 2 years of general education in high school if you plan to go to college.
Okay, so Viburnum opulus, then, known as crampbark, I'll just kind of read some of the information within the BHP. This is a 1983 edition of the BHP. So I don't know if, I should probably explain this too. The outer bark is the part of the plant that's used. So Viburnum is a kind of multi-stem shrub, grows to about 8 or 10 feet in height, depending on how long you want it to grow for before pruning it.
And people know the common name is snowball bush.
Well, yeah, that's one of the varieties of it.
Yeah, that means there's ornamental varieties, but those are going to be blooming here pretty soon. They're a spring bloomer.
Okay, so with Viburnum crampbark, you see that you get a pencil thickness or your index or middle finger thickness shoots coming from the base of the plant, and these shoots are what you collect. So you cut down 3 or 4 foot long pieces of this growth, and the plant has many of these all over it, depending on how well you're cutting it back, if you're coppicing it and allowing it to regrow, if you're just taking off a certain amount because you have it growing as a hedge, for example. And the cambium layer just underneath the bark is where you would use a knife, and it's labor intensive for sure. I don't know if there's any mechanized way for doing it perhaps, but you would just take a knife, like a Sharpie or a Stanley blade or some utility knife, and you basically will score down the length of the shoot all the way from one end to the other. And at the right time of year, in the beginning of the spring, when the cambium is beginning to rise, it separates quite easily. So you can peel back the bark and you get what's called a quill. So you can peel the whole thing back along that cut and separate that bark from the dead heartwood of the twig of the stem that you've cut. And it's that's used for herbal medicine. So when we look in the BHP, it gives you the descriptions of the bark, microscopical and macroscopical total acid insoluble ash. But getting to the point of herbal medicine, its actions and indications, it's a spasmolytic, sedative, astringent. Now, the Viburnum prunifolium, which is black haw, has also fairly similar actions. If we look for the specific indications, or the indications for Viburnum opulus, which is cramp bark, and then we'll cover Viburnum prunifolium, which is black haw. The indications then for cramp bark are spasmodic muscular cramp, uterine dysfunction, menopausal metrorrhagia, which is excessively heavy bleeding, threatened miscarriage, and partus preparator, so this is preparing for childbirth. Okay, infantile enuresis, which is bedwetting of young children. So that's the indications, the specific indications of the cramp, ovarian, and uterine pain. It can be combined with Dioscorea, which is wild yam, Xanthoxylum, which is the southern prickly ash, or with Viburnum prunifolium, black haw, and Camelarium, which I think I might cover very quickly, but it's a very rare endangered plant. I used to use it 24 years ago or so, but don't see it in the trade now. So black haw, Viburnum prunifolium, the other counterpart, is in the Caprifoliaceae as well as the other viburnum. So you see very similar phytochemicals expressed within plants within the same family and within the same genera. Not to say that's always the case, but it really does follow pretty closely. So for black haw, the actions are uterine sedative, spasmolytic, so it breaks spasms, anti-asthmatic. Again, this will be for bronchial constriction, hypotensive in this case, so it actually has an effect on blood pressure and can be used in certainly for hypotensive patients. Also, it's astringent. Its main indications here are for dysmenorrhea, so painful periods, false labor pains, and threatened miscarriage and asthma. So unlike Viburnum opulus, has extra muscular activity within the bronchial muscles. And then the specific indications are threatened abortion, especially with the rise in arterial tension. Okay, so those are the two viburnums. Certainly use a lot of it in England. I don't actually use that much of it here, must admit. It's not, it is available, but it's not one of those plants that I use a lot of. In Europe and in England, this plant, Viburnum opulus, is used in a large amount, and usually fluid extracts too. So British Herbal Pharmacopoeia talks about a 1 in 5, 45% ethanol extract. Dose is 5 to 10 ml. This is TDS, so 3 times a day. We make most of our extracts as 1 in 2 and 1 in 3. And they do list a 1 in 1 extract, 2 to 4 ml TDS. So this is still quite a large dose to be used to have this pharmacological effect, but certainly it does work, and it's been well used for a long time. Similar,
and it is a plant that can be used as a tea. So if you have, you know, it growing in your garden, and it is the Viburnum opulus is usually the one that is more common as a snowball bush.
Doesn't taste very good.
It's very tanniny, but you can, you know, strip the bark and make your own tea out of the bark of the shoots.
Okay, and again, the same thing with Viburnum prunifolium. The dose again is pretty high, so they give a 1 in 1 70% ethanol extract. So 70% is really going to pull out a lot more of those ethanol soluble things, unlike Viburnum opulus, which tends to be much more hydrophilic. So the dose for that again, 5 to 10 ml TDS for a 1 in 5 70% extract. So those two viburnums are both used relatively interchangeably, except one can have activity on bronchial smooth muscles and can be used for asthma. Okay, so rather than carrying on any of that, let's go to herbs for menorrhagia. Okay, so heavy, painful bleeding. So functionally, you need to rule out prime causes like uterine fibroids, cyst, or polyps. So these are very common, commonly found in cases with lots of bleeding, and hormone imbalances, as in estrogen to progesterone. So hormonal imbalance and the balance of estrogen and progesterone can cause excessive uterine lining buildup, and then uterine growths like fibroids, which are non-cancerous, or polyps can also come about through hormonal aberrations. And then ovarian dysfunction, failure to release an egg, disrupting progesterone levels, because that's obviously from the corpus, And then bleeding disorders, inherited bleeding disorders like von Willebrand's disease, and then other thyroid issues, kidney or liver disease, and then polycystic ovaries or pelvic inflammatory disease, again, which is equally troubling. So 2 other common herbs to address painful, heavy periods and menorrhagia. Don't often see this one used very much. In England, again, it's used quite a lot, but I don't see it even offered too much here. And that's shepherd's purse. So Capsella bursa pastoris is a uterine anti-hemorrhage herb, meaning that it can regulate or stop excessive menstrual bleeding, particularly useful for women who hemorrhage during childbirth or bleed postpartum, as it effectively stems the blood flow, preventing excess blood loss. It contains specific compounds that stimulate circulation, balance hormones, and exert an anti-inflammatory effect, which can reduce the pain associated with these menses. So before I speak to yarrow, which again is a kind of underappreciated herb as far as I'm concerned, because it's one of these herbs that does contain a huge amount of terpenes. It's not in the labiata, it's a composite, but it's not just the labiata, as I said at the beginning of the show, that have the specialty of producing terpenes, mono, di, and triterpenes. Lots of other plants do it. Achillea is one of them. So you're listening to Ask Your Herb, Dr. KMUD Garberville 91.1 FM from now until the end of the show at 8 o'clock. You're invited to call in with questions related or unrelated to fertility, infertility, and gynecological disorders and the treatment with herbs and herbal medicine. The number is 707-923-3911. So let's talk a little bit about yarrow. So it's another one of those anti-hemorrhagic herbs that's been used for centuries to treat bleeding wounds. Due to its astringent properties, the ability to constrict tissues, yarrow is very effective at stopping excessive blood flow. It also has the effect of tightening and strengthening tissues in the uterus, both of which help to regulate heavy menstrual flow. Yarrow is often used by herbalists to treat painful menstrual cramps, as it stimulates circulation and exerts an antispasmodic muscle reducing spasm effect, as well as an anti-inflammatory action. So I just want to quickly speak to some of the phytochemicals expressed within yarrow, Achillea millefolium, and these class of compounds. I'll just read these out. I do have a printout here of this. This is part of a research paper that was done on Achillea millefolium, looking at its pharmacology, and specifically brought out these compounds and spoke to the pharmacological effect. And it's kind of not unbelievable, I believe it, but it's amazing. It's incredible, the wealth of chemicals within this single plant. And like I said, all of these herbs that we use have phytochemicals of one kind or another. And pharmacology is proving time and time again that the tissues within the body that people suffer with various conditions, they're treated specifically by these compounds. It's like there's been a key and a lock there ever since. And it's just a case of knowing and finding these plants and being able to treat disease. Okay, we have a caller. Caller, you're on the air. Where are you from and what's your question?
I'm Mendocino. About 7 years ago, when Dr. Pete was on the air, I heard him say not to eat fish, and I don't know why he said that.
Fish.
And I've always wondered about it, so that's my question.
Okay, probably.
Probably to do with the heavy metals, number
yeah.
one. I mean, we've done lots of testing with fish and salmon from Shelter Cove, lingcod from Shelter Cove, crab from Shelter Cove, halibut. And the larger the fish,
and snappers.
Oh, and snapper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had a range. We had a range of heavy metal loading from one to the other. But go ahead and.
So Andrew can actually tell you what the results found, because we have to work with these lab testing companies that look at levels of heavy metals in our herbal products.
For Prop 65.
For Prop 65, you want to be looking for cadmium, mercury, lead, and arsenic. So
how about on the lower end, like sardines or anchovies?
Right. So that's what we found is the smaller the fish, like the little snapper had a lot less of the heavy metals, and the larger the fish, like the halibut, had the most. Salmon, it was a medium-sized salmon. Do you remember?
It wasn't too bad, actually.
The salmon
No.
was actually lower, and the ling cod was actually really high and closer to the halibut level. So I think that was primarily one of the things that Dr. Pete was.
Also, age has something to do with it.
Well,
It's
yeah, the longer the
accumulation.
fish has been swimming around, the more little fish it's been eating, the more cumulative. So Dr. Pete was always recommending to get your sea minerals, that the smaller the fish and the shellfish have a lot more minerals for the amount of muscle meat you eat. And they have a lot
oil bearing fish too.
Yeah, and the shellfish, the mussels, the clams, the oysters, they have a lot less heavy metals because they're lower on the food chain. But they also have a lot less of the fish oil. So because he was knowledgeable about the research showing that the fish oils are anti-inflammatory in their effect, but they suppress the immune system in long-term large doses. And so he didn't typically recommend you eat fish oil as a supplement. And, if you had it in a little bit of smoked salmon, a lot of that fish oil is oxidized already from the smoking process, and you're not going to be overloading on the polyunsaturated fatty acids or the omega oils that are going to suppress your immune system. And a lot of people find benefit taking fish oils because they are anti-inflammatory and people feel better on them. But the long-term effect is that you are weakening your immune system. And they're also hard on your liver. The polyunsaturated fatty acids are hard on the liver and do cause liver damage.
Okay, you're listening to Ask Your Herb Doctor, KMUD Garberville 91.1 FM. From now till the end of the show, you're invited to call in the questions. 707-923-3911. I think we have another caller on, another caller on the air. Let's take this caller. Where are you from, caller? What's your question?
I'm calling from Eureka, and I actually have a couple. I was just wondering, since we're talking about reproductive health for women, and I'm sorry I missed the first two parts, so I don't know what you covered there.
No problem.
But I was wondering if in the past 5 or 6 years, or the past 5 years actually, if you've noticed an increase in fertility dysfunction due to a certain medical intervention that temporally aligns with that time span, and also if there are any natural ways to flush some of those chemicals or those compounds out of the body, so to restore the fertility. And I don't really want to get too political or too radical about it, but it's a well-known fact, and there are actually, I'm going to say, dozens of papers now that have shown that mandated medical intervention has really done a number on the fertility, because two of the compounds in that have, rest into the testes and into the ovaries, and it's been really bad. So anyway, I'll take the answer off the, I'll get off the line and I'll take the answer on air.
Sure.
So thank you.
So I think what we're dealing with here is just another amount of inflammation. Okay. If you're referring to the experimental medication, it's inflammatory. That's how it works to boost the immune system. And so when you're dealing with fertility issues, inflammation is not what you want to be promoting. So there's lots of anti-inflammatory herbs that people can use to help deal with inflammation. One of my favorite ones is the bical skullcap, which is Scutellary bicalensis. It's very anti-inflammatory, and it's really good for people that suffer from the lingering effects of the inflammation from viral infections like long COVID, or even other flu viruses that people get where they just really don't feel well for months after they recover. So I really like Scutellary bicalensis is a really good post-viral anti-inflammatory, but it also works for experimental medications that we're trying to treat a virus.
Yeah, so speaking to the anti-inflammatory effects and the free radical quenching TXA2 and prostaglandin opposing chemicals, resveratrol and polygonum cuspidatum, one of those powerful antioxidants that can speak to that. As Sarah's mentioned, I think the main data from the literature was that the spike protein itself was particularly responsible for the inflammatory effects and certainly bound to just about every tissue going, including testes and ovaries, et cetera, et cetera. So the prevalence of infertility that may have arisen from that, I don't know that. I haven't looked at any specific data. I don't have that prepared, but I know that Dr. Pete would completely agree that there would be data supporting it. I just haven't seen it.
Have you guys seen the fairly recent research that was implicating the microlipid droplets in causing a biochemical cascade which caused an errant or different sort of autophagy? And that might have been implicated in the heart injuries, but it was also probably damaging other tissues but they just regenerate. And that biochemical cascade was blocked by genestin from the soy. And so I guess this seems new to you. So look into that, because it seems that whole technology, if people are taking that, then taking a ton of soy before and after. And I have a question for you about that, because someone asked me about that. Is fermented soy like natto, does that change the genestin, or do fermented soys have as much of the genestin as the raw soys?
I'm not as familiar with the before and after fermentation, but I do know that as far as, soy is a bean, a legume, and fermented soy is less thyroid suppressive. So it's changing some of those compounds that are blocking the thyroid function.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of research which comes out mixed with soy, and some people have said, well, the Asian research is using, studies on people and studies on fermented soys, whereas in the West, it's on like soy meal, and we're consuming more soy meal, so that there is definitely a big difference between raw soy and fermented soy.
Right,
and generally fermented being a lot better. But I was curious if that one chemical in that one application, that whether raw might be better. Right.
I'm not familiar with that research, but I do know, like, traditionally, soy was used as an animal food, as just the raw bean, and people didn't eat tofu that was raw, but people ate fermented soy. There's all sorts of different, in Asia, there's there's not just tamari, or soy sauce. There's lots of different fermented soy products. And it's like the South Americans figured out how to get the B vitamins and the minerals and the vitamins out of the corn by the nixtamalization process.
Turning it into masa.
Right, turning it into masa and boiling it in the lime, limestone lime. And that is how they figured out how to survive on masa.
Yeah, I heard in Japan, tofu is for old people and babies, but you do actually see a lot of people eating edamame.
Right.
That's the main way, and that's immature. So all those complex chemicals and proteins
are different.
Haven't formed yet.
And just like green beans and green peas and green soy, that is a lot less thyroid suppressive and easier to digest than the dried mature bean. So obviously the phytochemicals differ depending on the stage of the plant and the degree of ripeness and dryness. But that would be a good topic to delve into.
Yeah, so to the best of my knowledge, the genestin is highest in the raw, but I'm not sure about that. So
right. So maybe that would be something you'd want to
if you were taking that medical technology.
Right. If you're going to
if we want to
experiment, do medical experiment, take an experimental medical product, then that might be something, but maybe you'd want to have a purified form of that rather than having all of that raw bean product, because that would be hard on your thyroid and your digestion. Whereas if you had a purified, isolated compound, maybe that's what you could purchase. I'm not familiar with the research yet, Michael, but I will look into it.
So far as genestin is concerned, it was first isolated from Dyer's greenweed, the common name for Genista tinctoria, and the other plant that contains a lot of genestin, if you look it up, is kudzu, or Pueria lobata. And I was going to cover this. Funny you mentioned it, because I was going to look at this as one of the phytochemicals certainly used in the management of endometriosis. Genestin is one of those, and it decreases the expression of estrogen receptor alpha, as well as vascular endothelial growth factor. And hypoxia-inducible factor 1 alpha in peritoneal tissues. And this peritoneal location obviously is an extrauterine manifestation for endometriosis, that tissue getting into the peritoneal cavity. Just to speak to the research that was done by the Japanese when they were preparing patients for heart transplant, they found that they separated these two cohorts of patients, one into people that have had the COVID vaccine and patients that had not had the COVID vaccine. And what they found definitively was that the hearts of these two particular cohorts of patients were running on different fuels. So the non-COVID patients were running on glucose, and the COVID patients were not able to utilize able to utilize glucose, and it was the inability to keep up with the energy requirements in the COVID patients because their hearts weren't using it. That was actually the main problem. That's how these people.
Yes, you have to be careful what you say on YouTube because we will get blocked.
Okay, well, hopefully they won't block.
If you want to know more about that research, you can contact Andrew.
Well, you can check it out online. Okay.
Yeah. Or check it out online yourself.
You can look at the research that the Japanese done, and they were cardiologists. So anyway, let's continue to talk about yarrow, Achillea millefolium. The number here, if you want to call, is 707-923-3911. I see the lights flashing in the studio. I think somebody is calling in. So I'm going to talk to the phytochemicals within yarrow when I get a moment, and I'm happy to take the calls. A call away from, what's your question?
I'm from Eureka, Humboldt County. I had one comment and then a question. And the comment is, back in the day, my boss used to basically purchase cannabis for his wife when she was going through her menstrual period. Mm-hmm. And that's the only time she smoked it or that he would get it. And so obviously, I'm not sure if that had anything to do reduction in cramping or just easing of the, of dealing with it. But I have smoking it has allowed me to go out on the ocean and not get seasick when I normally do. Yeah. Yep. So my question had to do with your comment, and I don't want to distract you too much, but you were talking about red clover, mm-hmm. and I was curious what part of the red clover is cancer, you mentioned it had some anti-cancer or cancer treatment kind of properties, and also if I had someone tell me that broccoli seeds were, and that whole cruciferous family is kind of has association, but do you know about broccoli seeds particularly? And I'll listen off air. Thank you very much for being there. Bye-bye.
Thank you for your call. So as far as the cannabis use for menstrual period pain, it's an analgesic. It has analgesic effects. So it will be acting in that way. It does also have estrogenic effects. So it's kind of like a catch-22 because it could stimulate the estrogen that's causing the cramping in the first place. So it's not my first go-to for that, but I'm sure there's lots of people that have benefited from the analgesic effect of it. And then as far as all the broccoli plant family, they all contain DIM. It's shortened for DIM. And that's an anti-estrogen compound that it can block some estradiol, so diindolylmethane. And the broccoli seeds are probably a little bit higher in that. I'd have to do a little bit of research to find out if it was specifically in the broccoli seed and not necessarily in the kale seed or the cabbage seed or the Brussels sprout cauliflower seeds. They're all in the same family, collards. Those are all plants in the brassica family, and they all have slight anti-estrogen properties, but they also are thyroid suppressive. So I tend to think everything has to be in balance. They're wonderful plants. They have lots of minerals. Kale is king for minerals, and they're a good fiber for some people. Some people they're not, but it's not something you want to be juicing and eating raw every day in large quantities because you could risk blocking your thyroid. The actual medication for someone who's overdosed on synthetic prescription thyroid is a compound that's very high in cabbage. So traditionally, if someone had hyperthyroidism, too high of thyroid, they were told to drink cabbage juice. And, so it's not something you want to be taking daily in large doses raw. That's for sure.
So to speak to red clover, the question about the phytochemical expression within red clover, the two that come to mind, the phenolic glycosides, including trifolain, and also there are other flavonoids in it. I think these particularly are what confer the activity to red clover. They've probably done some more research recently, so you could take a look on the internet, but trifolain and other flavonoids, I believe those are the main components within red clover. I think that was the main question, right?
Yes, the red clover, it was to use the flowers.
Right.
That was the question, what part is the flowers?
Yeah. Okay, so looking at yarrow, I'll just give out the number once more because I'm totally happy to have people calling in. We can always cover this again next month and try and do another wrap up of part 4. But the number is 707-923-3911. So so yarrow, Achillea millefolium. Let's just call out the compounds that are in it from a class of compounds, and then we'll understand the kind of wealth of phytochemicals that some plants contain. So monoterpenes, okay, terpenoid ketones, flavonoids, polyols, estrogenic flavonoids, phenolic glycosides, and alkaloids. So these are some of the compounds within yarrow, mainly used as a styptic, obviously, but there are plenty of other effects of yarrow in terms of reducing fever. It's mainly, let's go through some of those kind of broad term definition uses for yarrow. Anti-inflammatory, has a triglyceride reducing effect. As antibacterial, anti-inflammatory, anti-tumor. These are the monoterpenes. It's antibacterial, and inhibitory effects on breast cancer and leukemia have been well documented. The same monoterpenes have also conferred it antioxidant and neuroprotective effects. The terpenoid ketones are antitussive, so they reduce cough, analgesic, reducing pain, and nasal decongestant. The same monoterpenes are also anti-inflammatory. They're hepatoprotective as well, so useful in terms of liver inflammation. The flavonoids have anti-tumor and anti-inflammatory effect. The polyols contain antioxidant, anti-inflammatory compounds. And then there are, again, other flavonoids with anti-inflammatory and anti-cancer activity, arresting the cell cycle, reducing pro-inflammatory cytokines. The phenolic glycosides are hepatoprotective, so they protect the liver. They're anti-carcinogenic, the antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, this inhibiting lipid peroxidation, anti-inflammatory, antibacterial again, and
it's also useful in lowering blood pressure if you have a high diastolic. It's not like a low, it doesn't lower your adrenaline, which is the systolic, which is the upper number, but the lower number, it can help to lower the high diastolic blood pressure reading.
Yeah. I mean, so lots of anti-inflammatory, anti-prostaglandin, anti-COX-2, inhibiting metallomatrix proteinases, down-regulating and decreasing tumor necrosis factor alpha. Yeah, plenty of different things. So I guess without going on too much about Achillea, if somebody wanted to take a look at the phytochemical profile of Achillea in terms of the compounds that we just know about at this point in time, you'll find lots and lots of reference to prove Achillea's use in the treatment of these particular pathologies. So again, as science matures and our knowledge matures, empirical information is becoming confirmed time and time again. What the ancients knew without electron microscopy and conventional high-tech equipment is just bearing truth to what was already known intuitively. Okay, so the number's 923-3911. I think we have one more caller on there. Let's take this next caller.
We do, and I did a tiny bit of research on Genestin. I still don't know if I pronounce it right. Genestin, so in your body, you actually do convert it into genestine, which is the more active, and the bacteria, at least in tempeh, the bacteria does that. So I'm going to say, based on very, very brief research, that it's the same in either, and your body turns one into the other. Very brief research just on the time you did that. And here is our call.
Hey, caller, you're on the air. Where are you from? What's your question?
Hi, I'm from Redway.
Oh,
This is way off topic, but I have a little problem.
Right.
I have an old cat, and she's not super healthy, and I want to find out if there's an herb, something natural, if I can make a flea collar for her. She's got fleas, and I don't use any of those terrible chemical things.
Well, pyrethrum daisy is one of those quote-unquote organic insecticides that's OMRI approved. So pyrethrum daisy, that's one thing. Obviously, there
diatomaceous earth.
Yeah, diatomaceous earth, which causes basic lacerations in the flea's body, and it kind of dries out and desiccates. But you mustn't let the animal breathe it in because it's very abrasive in terms of to the lung tissue. So you could dust your cat in it if you could keep his face away from it. So there's two things: diatomaceous earth and
it's okay for him to lick.
daisy.
He'll lick himself. He or she, sorry. But it's just you want to try to, when you're dusting the cat, not to. You want to try to cover their nose with a cloth.
So you're going to dust them with what now? I mean, just say it again.
Sorry, you diatomaceous earth is an effective flea dusting, a natural flea dust for the cat.
It's from fossilized diatoms. So.
And also around the bedding. And if you have a flea infestation in a carpet, that can also be useful. But again, for you too, you want to be careful. You want to wear a mask, and you want to put a cloth over the cat's nose.
And what is the other thing that you mentioned?
Pyrethrum, from the pyrethrum daisy. It's a certified organic insecticide.
And how can I apply that?
Well, again, you can probably get it in a powdered form.
And that's not toxic.
No, it is toxic. It's toxic to fish, but not cats. Not as far, not as far as I know. Don't do it near your fish pond. They don't like it too much.
And the only fish I eat is small fish, and I like pickled herring.
Oh, so do I.
All right. Well, thank you for your call.
Thank you for your program. It's very lovely listening to you.
You got it. You're very welcome. Okay. Well, look, it's 5 minutes to the top of the hour, so. I did not get a chance to finish everything that I had prepared in terms of pointers and subject matter to continue infertility. So I think I'd probably do it next month. I'm going to go through plant families and look at plant. Let me just tell you what I want to do next month. That way you can figure out if you want to listen to it or not. Okay, so next month we're going to do plant families. Basically, I'm going to cover things like, I'm going to cover PCOS again, the connection between oligomenorrhea and PCOS, but basically cover.
Which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. So that's another cause for infertility.
I want to cover the herbs used in endometriosis and the families they come from. So
and that's another cause of a female problem that can cause infertility, endometriosis.
Yeah. So there is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
And while you're looking at that,
there's about 15 different families from which compounds are used in herbal medicine to treat endometriosis, because there's many different avenues by which endometriosis can be treated, and it's not so simple and straightforward, but we love the subject and we enjoy working with patients with this. So it's not difficult. It's not difficult to really get some good results with endometriosis patients. And I want to tell you about the phytochemicals that are used and how they act physiologically to bring about a great reduction in endometriosis within somebody who has this. So just to speak to phytochemicals, the research that's been done on them, how they act, and just to further show that herbal medicine is a real treasure chest of real effective medicine. So I'm not anti-medicine at all. I have a lot of respect for regular medicine, but that's not what I studied. So we're going to be back on the air.
You did study regular medicine as well. We had to study all the same pharmacology. We did.
I understand how the drugs work.
We had to study all the different pharmacological agents.
So my name's Andrew Murray.
My name's Sarah Johannesson Murray. Thank you for joining us this evening.
You can find more information about us, and I consult with people about a wide range of conditions all over the States. So if you'd like a consultation with me, send me an email to andrew@westernbotanicalmedicine.com. But basically, you can find our website, westernbotanicalmedicine.com. And until the third Friday of next month, good night.
Thank you for listening. Good night. And happy spring.
This program is copyrighted. All rights are reserved. Reproduction in whole or in part without the express prior written consent of the owner.